Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and we are officially in football season. The national championship was just last night. Michigan took down UConn in basketball, and now we're moving. And how we're going to start off our college football preseason coverage is going to be we're going to go through every SEC team's portal moves. Now, this is not going to be a full roster breakdown. That will be after spring practices, where I'll do the same thing for every school, give you the two deep for every single squad. But right now, I'm doing just portal ins and outs, and we'll be going through every single player. We'll just be highlighting, the biggest movers that are both going out and coming in. And going alphabetically, we're starting with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, Kalen DeBoer's Crimson Tide made the playoff last year, won at Oklahoma, but then lost to the eventual champs Indiana in the Rose Bowl. And they kind of have to deal with some decent losses heading out from the transfer portal. Starting off with Isaiah Horton at receiver. He was a 42 catch guy. He had over 500 yards and 8 scores for Bama last year, including 3 touchdowns in that Iron Bowl win at Auburn to end the regular season. Now, he's more of that jump ball threat. He's more of your outside guy. So Bama does have to find some way to replace Isaiah Horton, and we'll get to how they did that just in a minute. But on some other guys who did leave the program, Richard Young at running back. Now, he was more of a depth piece. He only carried the ball 23 times last year for 64 yards and 2 scores, but he's a really talented back. You go back to preseason last year, this is a guy who people kind of thought could make some noise in the room, as it was last year. So Young will be moving on. He'll be, I think he should get a decent chance to start elsewhere, but Richard Young is no longer with the Crimson Tide. And then on the offensive line, Alabama is losing Wilkin Formby. He had a top 30 pass blocking grade in the country at offensive tackle last year. So I'm highlighting guys who left, right? And these are some pretty good guys. There's just some other dudes who did leave the program. Keon Keeley at edge. He was a former 5-star guy. He didn't really pan out. You started to hear his name a little bit more at the end of the year. I do believe he'll be a good player. You lost James Smith and Kelby Collins on the defensive line. Jalen Hale, another receiver who's leaving the program. Micah DeBose on the offensive line. Colby Peavy at safety, among some other guys. So Bama did lose 23 players going out in the transfer portal, but they brought in 17. I want to start with Devin Tompkins from USC. He's on the D-line, coming from the Trojans. He had 3 sacks and a forced fumble last year with the Trojans, including 31 tackles. So, you lost some pieces on the defensive line, like I brought up. It wasn't really some superstars, but you lost guys like Keon Keeley, who could be a star. You lost James Smith. You lost Kelby Collins. So bringing in a guy like Devin Tompkins is very important. They also brought in Terrence Green from Oregon, so a pair of West Coast D linemen are coming in to Tuscaloosa this year. At offensive line, to offset that Wilkins Formby loss, they're bringing in Ty Haywood from Michigan. He was a former blue chip recruit with the Wolverines last year. He was just a redshirt freshman, but he's a really talented guy. I mean, obviously, he was rated highly. He went to the Big Ten. He went to Michigan on the offensive line. That says enough, as is. And now Kalen DeBoer gets him in Tuscaloosa. And you lost Isaiah Horton, but you're adding in Noah Rogers from NC State at receiver. He had 33 catches for 441 yards and 2 scores last season. He's a speedy guy. He's a dynamic threat. Obviously, the hype around Ryan Coleman Williams, which, by the way, is going to be able to take off me to get used to saying that whole name for him. But Bama's going to have those skill guys, but you obviously need to backfill at those positions where you can really go, 7 or 8 guys deep at times in rooms like the receiver room. Some other guys that Kalen DeBoer brought in. You have Nick Brooks on the offensive line. He's coming in from Texas. Desmond Umeozulu from South Carolina. He's a defensive edge rusher. They have Josh Ford at tight end coming in from Oklahoma State. Carmelo O'Neal from Mercer. He's a safety. Now, that's a breakout guy that I do want to get into as the summer goes on. I think that Carmelo could be very good for Alabama. Kendrick Bingley Jones from Mississippi State also on the defensive line. So, kind of just looking through this list of who's coming in. It's 17 players coming in for Alabama. There's a pretty heavy emphasis on the lines. On both lines, offensive and defensive. So DeBoer is trying to build from the inside out. And maybe the biggest storyline about Alabama's transfer portal class was a downside. And that's that they had Hollywood Smothers. The NC State running back, an absolute superstar in the sport. They hadn't committed. We thought that Bama was going to have Smothers to be the closest thing to Jahmyr Gibbs that they've had since Jahmyr Gibbs. And then Texas came in and swiped them. So that is, the portal giveth and taketh away, sometimes with the same guy in the same class. So that was kind of the biggest headline for Bama in the portal, was that gain of Hollywood Smothers just to lose him. But you can't really let that overlook, what they did actually end up bringing in. And the Isaiah Horton, losing him, replacing with Noah Rogers. I mean, Rogers is a former 5-star guy. He's an incredibly talented player. I brought up the amount of losses on the defensive line with James Smith, Kelby Collins, Jordan Renaud on the D line, but they got Tompkins and Green to backfill. And I do believe that Ty Haywood for Wilkin Formby, it's not a bad trade. Formby's a great player, but I do believe that Ty Haywood's ceiling is really, really high. So Bama, I mean, it's not really a surprise, but they're going to have good talent. Kalen DeBoer is going to have a very talented team. And as we get into, further into the summer, we'll break down Bama's schedule, we'll break down their whole roster and the outlook for that squad. But, the Hollywood, some other stuff aside, they did a good job in the portal. I don't believe that Alabama was a portal loser by any means. I think they did a good job of backfilling talent because obviously every school is going to have to deal with losing some pretty high caliber players. But the biggest question is, who can you backfill that talent with? I think that the board did a really good job. So Alabama, like always, is going to have a very talented roster, and I'm excited to see how it comes together. We'll have reports from spring practice, scrimmages, and spring games to really get a sense for what this team is looking like, and I'll have that all for you here. So if you want to see the transfer portal videos for your school, subscribe to me here. I'll be getting to all of them in the next 2 weeks, and you just want to see all of the SEC football content from now until kickoff, subscribe to me here. Follow me on Twitter. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.